Okay, so in the last video, we looked at how do we map out our core processes so that we understand the most important things that we do and how that works with the rest of the company, from the first input to the final output. And we related that back to the unique value proposition and why it matters. That gave us kind of a good foundation to understand what's going on in the company. So now in this video, what we're going to do is start to build out the measurement system. So we're going to look at data. We're going to look at what do we do with the data, where does it come from, and this is going to kind of set the stage of understanding so that when we go forward in the final video, in the next video, and we start talking about implementation, this is going to be the way that we really start to command that growth because we've got the full understanding. Now we've got the data so we can manage and measure things as we go forward to ensure that we're growing like we want to be growing. Okay, so one thing before we get started, I've got a couple of synthetic data sets, so basically made up data sets that are just going to be kind of representative of a few different, give you an idea of how I go about modifying data sets to get them into a format where they're useful. And the key thing is to do it in a way that's that requires little work so that you can click a few buttons and get reports done very quickly. Because that starts to matter when things change or you want to do things like sensitivity analysis, which we'll do later. You can't really be spending time manually doing all this stuff, especially if you've got thousands of lines or tens of thousands of lines of data that are coming out of your systems. That's really not feasible. So in this video, we're going to show how to do that, basically how to set up some macros so that we can click buttons, so we can clean and filter and structure our data to get it ready in just a click of a few buttons here. Okay, and we'll talk about how we can even automate more of the process as well. So this is another key thing that I do. This helps with your understanding, but it also helps with going forward as well. So that's what we're going to be doing in this video. Okay, so ideally you have access to data that relates to your core processes. So if you're in logistics or accounting or sales, ideally you can go to your ERP, MRP, or even CRM system and export data into a format like an Excel file or a CSV or a JSON file, something like that that you can then import into Excel. Now, one thing I'll say is you want to try to get it as much direct from the source as you can. You don't really want to rely on intermediaries because the whole purpose of this is to take raw data and build out our own systems. So, if a CRM system is pulling data from an ERP system, and the ERP system is the one that's really software that's doing all the recording, then you don't want to pull data from the CRM system because that's a filter between the raw data and what you're doing. There could be errors in the CRM system or the way that it's exporting or categorizing data, and that could lead to errors in your processes. So what you would want to do is go back to the ERP system and say, I want to pull data from here. Okay, so again, we've got our blank Excel file here. Okay, so your ERP system, and as you can read here, what we're doing is we're pulling sales data. Okay, and this is for the month of April. It's going to look a little weird. It's going to look a little messy. It always does. Okay, especially if you're importing the raw data, probably a little bit more than what you're going to get. You're probably going to get something pretty bare bones, but again, this is actually pretty representative of what you're going to get. It's going to include like spaces. It's going to include metadata. Okay, you don't want that, and this is exactly why we're doing it. And it's important. You'll see why, but it's important to do it raw so that you can see the real messiness of the situation. Now, the first thing we want to do is clean the data, filter it. So like get out everything that we don't need. Okay, so we're going to want to start looking at this, and eventually we're going to start looking at these individual items where we can start to see things that we don't need. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, eventually what I'm going to do is we're going to write macros, and we're going to go cell by cell, and we're going to say, essentially, if a cell contains the word growth, remove that row. Okay, if a cell contains, if in this column, okay, column A, we're going to column A here. If a cell, and you want to find unique words that aren't reused. Okay, so we know that all of our order IDs start with ORD with a number. Okay, So there's little chance that we're going to run into issues there. So we can basically say, look in every row, and if it has the word growth, use, okay, order, sales, or generated, we can delete those rows. The next thing we'll do is delete the empty rows. Okay, that'll be the next part of it, is delete every row that has no information in it. Okay, that's going to be the first macro. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to jump over to the AI and we're going to start to talk through this and generate the code. Okay. Now the good thing about this is that this already knows my data sets because it helped me generate the synthetic data sets to begin with. So it already has that information. So we should be good just to move forward and get started. So the first thing I'm going to prompt it to do is just kind of give it an overview of what we're going to do now. Help me write Excel macros to clean the data. I want to go row by row and look for rows that contain the words, and capitalization matters, I think, in Excel. So make sure you've got it exactly as it shows up in the cell. Otherwise, it may not catch it. Growth, use, order, sales, generated. And if column A contains any of these words for that row, delete the row. And now I'm going to give it a couple of additional things that I just, because of the way, my experience and the way I like to code. So I'm going to say use a for loop to evaluate each row. And then there's another tip I'm going to tell it ahead of time because I know this is a tricky thing. Make sure that after a row is deleted, the counter backs up a row so that no rows are skipped. So if a row is deleted, you need to do something like, I equals I minus 1 so that when next I is triggered, and it'll probably know what I'm talking about here, but essentially this is, and if you're not familiar with what I'm doing here, this is just code for how a for loop works. You set a variable I, which represents the row that you're going to be working on, and it has a range. So that's actually what I'm going to do next. Okay, so another useful thing that you need to do is there's code that you can use that will automatically find the number of the last row that contains data in it. And you need to have that as part of your code because each data set could be different. So in some data sets you might have 1,000 rows, in some you might have 500, in some you might have 10,000. So when you're evaluating row by row, you need to get the exact number of rows that you're evaluating because that's the exact range you want to do and nothing more, okay, nothing less. Because if you don't do that, Excel will just continue to evaluate rows until it'll try to evaluate all the rows like 1.5 million rows. We're going to find the last row, something like that. Okay, so now basically you're going to understand this, but I'm just saying find the last row and then set that range, okay, and then run the for loop. Look in column A. If column A contains any text that has those words in it, we're going to delete that row. Then we're going to make sure that we're backing up so that when that row is deleted, we're on the right level. Everything should work, okay? And then I always like to throw in a makes sense just so that if it has any questions or sees problems. I'm working on the sales data first. So the April and May data sets of sales data, not procurement. Don't just take code out of AI and run it. Make sure you understand it, make sure it makes sense, and it's doing what you want it to do. I, again, is what it's going to use to evaluate each row, and then cell text as a string. So what it's going to do is it's going to pull all the text out of that column A cell, and it's going to store it in this variable called cell text. And then that's what it's going to use to say, within cell text, are any of these contained? And then if so, delete. Something like that. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. Find the last row. Okay, last row equals cells row count and Excel up. I'm not 100% sure if that's the right way to do it. I'm going to check on that real quick. And I'm going to use a different AI to verify that that's the correct command. This is another thing I do. If something's not sure to me and I don't want to break my prompt here, I'll go to a different AI and just verify. So that's what I'm going to do now. Okay, so I verified that this is correct, and it is. So, and it told me a little bit more about it too. So actually what this is doing is it's going to the very last row in a workbook, which is like row 1 million. And then essentially what this does is it mimics saying, pressing the control key and hitting the up arrow. So that's exactly what it does. And then it returns the number where that stops. And there's a couple other caveats. Obviously, this is only evaluating column A, and that's important. So in some data sets, you may have missing information, okay? And this is something you're going to have to deal with. So like in our data set, we had all the data was completely filled out for every row. So that's very nice. But you may have somewhere you're missing some of that first information in column A. And if that happens, you're going to have to look. You might want to look in column B, has everything complete. Maybe you're evaluating column B instead, something like that, or column A and column B. Okay, that's something to be aware of. The other thing that it mentioned is that it skips hidden rows. So if you again, this is why you don't want to do anything before. But if for some reason you had hidden rows or rows were hidden, it wouldn't be evaluated. So that's a way that this could get screwed up. Okay, so that's what that does. Now we're going to get into the part we're looping. So we set I equals to 1. So that's going to be row 1. That's where we're starting. Okay, in this case, it's using a do while loop, which is similar to a for loop. Okay, it's just another way to do it. If I was really picky here, what I'd actually want to do is tell it, I don't like the do while. Like just do it as a for loop. But it does the same thing. So what this says is that do while this condition is true. So essentially, while I is less than or equal to that last row number, execute everything within this while loop, okay? Right here. And this is where it loops again. You don't have to, with a for loop, you don't have to do that. It automatically is assumed that you're looping it. But again, this is just another way to do it. So it's starting at row 1. It is pulling the value of I. Okay, that's the row that we're on. It starts at 1. Go to the row that we're on right now, row 1, column A, and pull that value. Okay, store it as this variable, cell text. So now it's got that text. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to check if it contains any of the words. Okay. So in this one, now what it's saying, if in string, so again, this is a string, that's what the variable is called. If in that string, if it contains growth, so essentially if it's returning a value greater than 0. So what it's doing is saying if that's true. So if it does contain, because if it contains growth, it will return a value of 1. It will say it's true. 1 is true, 0 is false. That's the way that that coding in Visual Basic works. So basically what this is saying is that if that's returned as true, if any of these are returned as true, then, okay, delete the row. That row that we are on, delete the whole thing. Okay, now back up so we don't skip a row. See, it understood. Now we're going back a row because, and this is updating the last row too, so that's smart. So because we deleted a row, our last row also backed up. Okay, so now we don't have to go as far because we deleted a row. So that's smart. I didn't catch that at first. But what this is going to do, it's going to back up both of those. And then at the end here, you're going to the next row. So we're saying I equals where we're at now, which is 1 plus 1. So now it's going to go to 2. Okay, so this should perfectly execute what we want it to do. And then it's going to loop back up here. And it's going to go through all of those rows that we want it to. And then it included a message box to pop up and say, cleaning complete. This many rows processed. And then it's going to end. So that's perfectly fine. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy this. Okay. And then we're going to take this over to our workbook and we're going to run it. And let's see if it did what we want it to do. Okay, so here we are over here. And what we're going to do is we are going to open up Visual Basic within the Developer tab. And we need to make sure we're in the right file because this opens up everything. So we want to be in book 1. And actually, before I do this, Okay, so right now book one has no data. Going back to what I said, what you want to do is what I'm going to do what I'm going to do for this is I'm just going to copy paste it into book one because I don't want to go through the whole import process. That just takes time, and I don't want to have to go through all my personal files and everything. So I'm just going to copy paste it into book one, and I'm going to rename this like raw data. Okay, so this is our raw data. What you would want to do more realistically is go into data and then get data and then from file from whatever it is that you had exported. Okay, and it's going to open up a box and say where is it. So you navigate to it and select it, and then you'll get a box that says it'll give you some options. But essentially, the only one you want to pay attention to is it'll ask you where do you want to put it, and I pretty much always say A1, the first cell, and then OK, and don't do anything else to it, and it should put all the information right there. Okay, so first open up the file itself to evaluate it, so you understand it. But when you actually do your process, you're going to use this import command because the import process can be automated. Okay, copy paste is harder to do, but an import is easier to automate at the end of the day. So that's why we do that. But for now, I'm just going to copy paste it because I don't want to go through all that stuff. So now we have that. We're going to go, once you have that, we're going to go back to developer and then Visual Basic. Okay, and we are working in book one. It's not saved yet. Sheet one, raw data. But really what you're going to want to do is right click, insert module. Okay, that's what they're called. This is where you're going to put your code. So what we're going to want to do is copy over that code and paste it into here. And I'm going to do that now. Okay, so I just went back and copied and pasted all the code that we just went through here. Now we're good to go. Now there's a couple of things I need to do here. So this is not the name of our book. Actually, the name of our book is just book one right now. That's important because it's going to try to look for a book with that name. And again, I'm not sure this is absolutely necessary to do this. It did it this way, and really why it did it is because this is a way to bulletproof it so that if you have multiple files open, you can ensure that this macro will pull from the right book. Because you can see here, when you do Visual Basic, it opens every Excel file that you currently have open. Okay, so it's got the data, it's got that other Excel file that is the raw synthetic data set. Okay, so it's the better way to do it. You should be specific about which book am I working in, and it's doing it the right way. But I just needed to change that name so that it actually matched. Everything else should be good to go. The only other thing I want to do is I want to include a command. We're going to put in this code, and what this does is it basically stops, and we're going to set it back to true at the end. So what this does is it stops Excel from updating, visually updating where you can see. Like when you're manually doing it, you type in a number, you hit enter, you can see all of that, okay? When Excel runs code, it actually will show you the code executing. So it will show you it going line by line, like deleting a row. Like for the most part, you don't want to see that. You just want to see the final result. Sometimes it might be useful to actually see to make sure it's working. But in production, you almost never want to do that because it slows down the process. Like it takes a lot longer for it to visually show versus if you say stop updating the screen, it will kind of freeze the program, then execute the code really quickly, and turn back on the updating at the end. So you have to put in both of them at the beginning and the end. If you didn't, then it would just freeze the program and you'd be in big trouble. But this is a good way to speed up code execution with an Excel. You should always include this, especially in production. Like if you're developing the code at first, maybe you want to see it. But again, and if you're doing that, you want to work on a small data set. So like that's not going to be very time consuming. Like do a small data set that proves out that code works, and then expand it after you've proven that out. Because again, timing, it can get into taking minutes for code to execute if you don't do that, and that makes it very hard to iterate because now I need to make a change and run it again, make a change, run it again, and if it's taking minutes, all of a sudden you're getting into hours actually. So, that's just another tip. Okay, so that is now in there, page, and we're going to put a button here that's going to do this first thing for us. In the end, you might want to combine functions. Sometimes you want it separate. Like you might want to see first that it deleted the rows and then deleted the blank spaces. At the end of the day, we'll probably just have the button to do everything at once. But sometimes you might want to break out the macros to do it sequentially. But for our purposes, we can probably just do everything in one. So what I'm going to do is I did insert, and we're going to do button. Try it again. Okay, and then I'm just going to drag a space over here. Okay, now that is the macro we just created. Now, where did I get that from? It's right here, clean sales data, okay? Whatever name you name that is going to show up here. So we'll say okay. Okay, put it in. Now what we want to do is rename this, and we're going to say clean data. Okay, then click off of it. Now when we click on that, it's going to run that code. If you want to change this name, you can't do it this way. It will just run the code. You have to right-click on it, and then after you right-click on it, now you can resize it and change the name. Just be careful because sometimes you think you can like double-click on it or like select it, and actually it won't do that. It'll just run your code. And then if you have a big data set, you're waiting minutes for it to run the code while all you wanted to do was change the name. So that's another tip. Okay, so we got that. Let's see if this works. Clean data. Now, if it works, it should remove all of these rows, okay, but it should keep all of the data, and it should keep the blank spaces too. Let's see. Okay, so we got an error. This is good. Okay, so basically there's a naming issue because it is looking for, okay, I know what I did wrong. It's looking for the name of the sheet. It's raw data. Okay, so it needs the name of the sheet here because it's looking in this workbook already. So that means the one that's active. It doesn't need the name of the workbook, but it is looking for sheets and it needs raw data. That's the name of the sheet. So we're going to do that. We're going to save it. And then we're going to try it again. Okay, we get the box. Okay. So we made progress here. It looks like it did, for the most part, everything we wanted. For some reason, it didn't catch. Oh, because of the case sensitive. So let me go check the raw data here. Okay, so the only place where growth shows up is there. Okay, so what we need to do is make sure it's capitalized. Okay. So that's pretty easy fix. All we need to do is go back into our code and change this to be capitalized. Growth, like that. Okay, now we should be able to just run it again and it should pull out that first line. Boom, perfect. Okay, so let's move this down here and resize it. Okay, great. Now what we need to do is we need to check and make sure that none of the actual data got erased, okay? And let's see if I can do kind of a, ideally you do this on dual monitors. You can just do one on one and one on the other. But let's just look here. So we have 4000 to 4016, 4007. Okay, so a good way to do this is like go to where the lines have been deleted. Okay, so you know that between 22 and 23, something should have been deleted. So let's go 22, 23. Perfect. They are both there, but the thing was deleted. Okay. Now, if you had seen 23 was also deleted or something like that, then obviously, you would want to troubleshoot that. And the other thing too is look across the way that everything should match still. Yeah, all the data looks like it's still there in the same row. In the same format, 34, again, between 45 and 46, yep, we're good. So the other thing you can do if you've got small data, what you do is you can actually like look at the number of rows. So that was 193 and then subtract. Okay, so 193 minus 13 should be 180. And let's just look and see. Okay, 180. Sorry, my thing was blocking and I couldn't see. So it has 180. So it has the exact amount of rows that should have been left. We know that did the first thing. Now we're going to go back and we're going to delete the empty cells. Actually, and I can do this. It's not too hard because we've already got the structure. So what we're going to do is we are going to just add another, we're going to copy that in, but we're not looking for sales. Actually, what we're looking for is empty. Okay. So if you have just the open close brackets with nothing in it, that means empty. So now it's going to look for empty cells and delete them within our range. That's pretty easy thing to do. Once you get used to this stuff, you'll pick up these tricks. So if you don't see that right away, then just go back to AI, tell it what you want to do, and have AI make the change. But we should be able to do it pretty easily just in that. Okay, so now it should just get rid of the empties. So this should slide up. 16, 17 should be right next to each other, etc. Okay, so one thing real quick that was causing some issues here. We can't use the in-string command because it's looking in that string of text for an empty cell, for empty space, and everyone would return true. So we have to use a different command. And basically, what we're going to say is we're going to use this command. Basically, we're going to look at what is if the only thing in the cell is equal to empty. Okay, so we're not evaluating that string anymore, but instead we're going to say if anything in it is empty, if it's totally empty, then we're going to delete it. So let's go back and try this. And again, this is important, why it's important to keep that raw data set, because I tried to implement that and it deleted everything. Okay, so if that was my only data set, I'm in big trouble. But because I had it backed up, I can just reload it and we can run it again. So now this should do everything. And again, this might be a good you would want to break out different buttons and different macros. Like you might want to create a macro just to do the first part, which is remove those. So at least you know that part works. And then another macro will come in later so you can kind of see sequentially, at least until you get it up and running. But for this one, we're going to try to do it all in one. So now if this works perfectly, only the cells remain that are important. Okay, so that looks like that did the trick. And everything looks like it's there. Again, we only have 180 lines. Let's just double check again to make sure that is correct. And there are some other ways that we can check as well, but first I'm just going to try to highlight again, because my data set is relatively small. This isn't that time consuming, but you may need to develop even macros to check your data. If you've got really complicated or long data sets, it may make sense for you to write a macro that actually okay, 180. So that's right. Now what I want to do is I want to check so 16 and 17 should be next to each other. I want to make sure that looks right. And again, there's 180 rows here, so we know that it looks like everything works, but again, I want to do some spot checks. 16, 17 are right next to each other. Let's look at another one further down. 101, 102 should be right next to each other. 101, 102. And again, it's Summit and Horizon Metals. It's good to go down through your data set. So if you're going to have errors, it's going to be likely more towards the end where things don't line up or certain things were deleted. But in our case, it looks like everything's great. So we have got all of the data that we started with, perfectly cleaned and ready to go to start structuring it. I'm going to copy all this data, okay, and I'm going to move it over to sheet 2 here, if I can. Oh, apparently I can't. Let's try this again. Okay, so, okay, now we've copied all of that over. Okay, so now this is a finalized set. This is like April sales. Okay, so now what I can do is I can come in here and I can delete all that. Okay, now let's load in. Now we can load in our our May data, and that's what I'm going to do next. Okay, so this is actually a different data set, same format and everything. Okay, so like this is simulating. Okay, now it's the next month, and it's May, and this is the data I've got. Now you'll notice like all the rest of the stuff will always be the same. The extra stuff will always be the same because your report will always be formatted the same, or it should be always formatted the same. But the individual data might be different. Okay, and that's what we're trying to capture. So because this is sales data, like different parts would be sold, different quantities, different customers, all that. But because we've set it up, now we can just import. I'm copy pasting, but you would import this back into your book 1 for May. Okay. And again, keep that raw data. So you have April, now you've got May in there, and all you got to do is import May. You pull it back into this raw data sheet, okay? And if everything works right, this should still work for this. Okay, this time we had 185 rows, and it looks like everything worked perfectly. I'm not going to do an extensive check on this because I want to save a little bit of time here, but what I would do until I'm absolutely sure is I'd go back through and do basically what I did for April, and I'd verify that different time frames the macro still works. Okay, that's key because you want to be able to load in anything and have it work. And in our case, it looks like it absolutely does. So what I'm going to do is, again, now what you can do is you could take this and copy it, and we can throw it into here, and now we've got a May data that is set up and ready to go, okay, for us. And we'll just rename this May. So again, like it gets that easy once you've got everything set up. Now you've got a simple process. Export, import raw data, and click a button, and you've got all the data cleaned, ready to go for that month. Okay. So the next part we're going to do is we're going to structure this a little bit. And what we want to do with that is basically structuring is a way to kind of, make it easier to understand. So what we probably want to do is analyze sales by customer. Okay. Now, going back to our original data set here in April, column C has the customer name in it. Of course, you could also do it by customer ID if you wanted to, but essentially what we need is another macro that's going to go through and pull and organize all of the customer, all the line items for that customer and group them together. So that at the end of the day, what we really want is we want to be able to look at the data and see, like Summit Forge. I want to see only Summit Forge. Okay, I want to look at everything that they purchased for this month, and I want it grouped together. Okay, that's what we're going to do next. Okay, so here we are back over on the AI side, and what I want to do now is I want to write another macro to structure the data. Okay, so one thing I want to do is I'm going to do customer ID. Actually, we can just do, okay, so I'm going to do customer name. You may want to do customer ID just in case the name ever changes over time. In this case, it doesn't matter, but in future cases, you may want to use, if you assign a number to a customer, that's typically more reliable because names can change over time. So I would do typically customer ID, but for now, I'm just going to do customer name. And let's see what this does. Okay. Okay, so let's take a look at it real quick. doing the same thing, finding the last row with data. That's what we wanted. To find the full range. Yep. Column C equals customer name. Yep, we know that. Okay, data range. It's setting a range between the first one to K and last row. Okay, so it's basically looking at the entire chunk of data, and then what it's doing is it's sorting column C, data range. Okay, and I think it needs to create the range first in order to use the sort function, which is why it's doing that. So essentially it's saying here's our range, now we're just going to sort, and the key that we're sorting it by is column C, which is the customer name. And then we're doing it ascending. It does have a header. That could be wrong. Match case false. So one thing I want to ask is, like, the clean data does not have a header. It's only the rows. Okay, so I'm just going to ask it about that. Okay, so you can see here, good catch, you're right. Since you cleaned it, it has no header row. Okay, we should change it, header no. Okay, so this is why I do it before I actually do it. Okay, so now now it should be good to go. I mean, it's pretty easy on this one, but just because we're just using the sort function. So let's see if this does it. I'm going to copy that, and we're going to bring it over to the file, create a new macro. Okay, here we are back in our workbook. So we're going to go back to our Visual Basic, and we're going to click on our right-click, insert module, another module, okay? And this is where we're going to paste our new macro, new name, sort by customer name, and everything else copied over. Okay, we can save this, and now let's go back over here. Okay, so the way that you want to do this is different. Like, it might be different. You probably actually would want to, what you would want to do is you would want to do both on the raw data before you copied them over to April and May. Okay, these should be the finalized data. So we're gonna just change that real quick. I'm gonna put the new button here. Okay, this one is sort by customer name. So this is going to be sort data. Okay, and actually what I want to do is I'm going to start over, so we can just do both. Okay, so now this simulated, okay, we just imported our April data. Let's clean it. Okay, now let's sort it, see if this works. Okay, so again, I ran into that mistake. Raw data, it should be, change that. Okay. Okay, so here we are simulating again that we just imported our data, and actually I have to move these or else they'll get deleted. So let's just move these down here. Okay, so we've imported our April data. Now let's clean it. Okay, and then let's sort it and see if this works. Okay, that looks like it did the trick. Let's check our rows. 180 rows still, perfect. Okay, so now we've got everything really set up really well, okay? So now what we would want to do is take this, put it in April. Okay, one more time here. Okay, now we've got that. And actually what I would probably do is in this one I would keep the headers, so I'd add the headers back. You can just do it manually, but because you're copy pasting, it's easier to do it. So okay, there you go. So now we added those back in. And actually what I want to do is I'm going to put these, I'm going to redo this one, put them in here. And actually what you could do is just keep this like blank structure and then just copy it. Doesn't really matter. Okay, so that was April. Perfect. Now what we want to do is We want to simulate May. Okay, so now we've got our May data. You would just import it. You wouldn't even need to do this. Okay, but I'm just doing it for simplicity here. Okay, we've imported our May data. There it is. I need to move this again. And now let's clean it and sort it. Boom. Okay, check the rows. 185, perfect. Okay, and then what you can do is copy that over to May. Boom. Okay, that's exactly how you would. This is the type of thinking and system that you would do to get your data, set up a process where you can import it, then set up macros that can, in one click, clean it, structure it. Okay, now we can very quickly see, you can do a lot with this. Okay, and that's what we're going to talk about next in the next part here, but or in the next video. But now you can start to do things. You can track. You can start to set up tables, reports. For example, one thing I like to do is look at Acme Manufacturing. Okay, sum up their sales. Okay, this is the total. So you got the quantity, the sales price, and then the total sales. So you could sum up everything for Acme and see how much sales by account. Okay, so now you've got a quick way to look at how much sales per month are my customers even doing. So you've got the structure of a CRM report right here. Is a CRM system is what you have. And this is a great way to double check some of your systems. If you have CRM, now you can go in and see, what did Acme Manufacturing do for April? What did it do for May? And compare the numbers. If they're wrong, then either something you did is wrong or something the CRM is doing is wrong. And more often than not, actually, the CRM will be wrong. I've found that quite a bit. I mean, things can be miscategorized. Maybe a customer that should have been yours is actually not. It's categorized in a different area. And so the sales numbers aren't matching up right. You find out all kinds of things. The last thing I want to talk about is combining data sets. Okay, so let me bring up another data set real quick. Okay, so this is similar synthetic data, made up data from a procurement system. Okay, this is the purchasing side. This is the cost side of things. Okay, if you can now you've got these two things. Let's say you're able to get two different sets of reports. You can do the same exact thing to structure this data, okay, but and look at, it has the same part number in it, so you can join the data sets by the part number. So what I can do is I could say, okay, let's copy over, let's write a macro that will analyze, okay, for every one of these part numbers, what it should do is add in a new column. And in that new column, I want it to copy over the landed cost. Okay, so now once you have landed cost combined with sales, you can do things like margin analysis, gross profit analysis. Okay, you can see maybe some parts you're actually negative margin on. I've seen that. What happened over time is the supplier raised their costs, and the system never flagged it because they weren't connected. So the procurement system didn't talk to the sales system, and so the sales team never got updated, and no one caught it because the system wasn't flagging it. But because even doing basic things like this, you can look at that and say, you might see parts that have negative margins on it because the suppliers raised their costs, it never got flagged, and you didn't adjust your sales price, and now it's negative margin. Okay, these are just some of the things that we'll talk about when you're implementing, this data. And again, this should tie back to what we did in the earlier videos. So you want to find that data for your core processes. So if your core process was a sales function, this would perfectly tie into that, because now you've got a system where you're tracking data. You've got all kinds of information about customers, about part costs. You're bringing in a lot of good stuff here. And with a couple of clicks of a button, you've got it set up and ready to go. So now you can track it over time, and we can set up implementation plans, which is what we'll do in our next video, to discuss how can we use this data to target those core processes and increase our value, our unique value proposition. So that's where I'm going to end it here. And like I said, in the next video, we'll talk about how we actually create strategies and plans that can improve our value. So again, if you want more help or information on this, and if you don't have the files, click over to or go over to jasonunlock.com and enter your information. You can download them for free, and be sure to subscribe as well, and you'll get notified when more videos like this come out. So thanks for watching, and go ahead and click to the next video when you're ready to move on.